Transmission costs for the Humboldt Sentinel are brought to you in part by KGOE News Talk 1480. KGOE 1480 is the predominantly progressive news talk station in Humboldt County that is also the radio home of the Humboldt Crabs.
Thank you, and thank you, Xanda, for gathering us together here and bringing the press, and wonderful to have the opportunity to talk to people. You know, we are in this incredible moment right now where democracy is kind of breaking out all over the place, from the revolutions in the Middle East to the uprisings in Wisconsin and the Occupy protests all over the country. And at the same time that democracy is breaking out, people are breaking away from the establishment political parties in large numbers, really in record numbers. We see this in polls, like the Washington Post poll about a month or two ago that found 49% of people thought there was a need for a third party. 46% were saying they would seriously consider voting for one. And you know, we also see it in voter registrations and just talking to people on the street. People are not just like hungry for change, they're just incredibly fed up and kind of hitting the wall with politics as usual. So you put that all together in the context of a presidential election, it really means that this could be a very powerful tipping point to take back this promise of our democracy and the peaceful, just, green future that we deserve and that we need more than ever. And people, you know, people are hitting the wall. We badly need this tipping point now because in so many ways we have hit the breaking point. The breaking point for people, for the planet, for our economy, and for our democracy. And we didn't get here by accident. We've gotten here thanks to a political establishment, both its Democratic and Republican wings, that have basically delivered crisis after crisis. And in so many ways, Barack Obama has basically embraced the policies of George Bush and even taken them further and done what George Bush never could have gotten away with. This president has been able to get away with, in part because he's a great orator, but also in part because many people don't want to make waves, and they've bought into this politics of fear, which we'll talk about in a moment. But you know, just to look at the record, to make the point, because a lot of people have sort of gone to sleep and they're accepting the propaganda out there that, oh, we've got to have a Democrat, we've got to have Barack Obama. It's really important to see what the record is. On the Wall Street bailouts, under George Bush, it was about $800 billion. Under Barack Obama, it's been somewhere between 7 and 16 trillion, depending on how you count it, in the free giveaways, the free loans, and the all-out giveaways to Wall Street and multinational corporations, declining workers' wages, and the layoffs. That's still going on under Barack Obama, in part on account of these free trade agreements, which have been further expanded under this current president, the attacks on Medicare and Social Security, which are ongoing, the epidemic of home foreclosures, 6 million down, another 6 million to go, and there's essentially been nothing done about that crisis. People are still losing their homes. Even when he had both houses of Congress, essentially nothing got done, and nothing, you know, continues to get done. The expanding wars for oil. This was going to be the priest president, but hardly. In fact, he withdrew from Iraq because he was unable to negotiate an extension of immunity for the soldiers in Iraq. So he reluctantly accepted that withdrawal date that had been established by George Bush because he was unable to push it back. One of his first acts in office was actually to intensify the bombing in Pakistan and then to start the drone wars in Yemen and in Somalia as well, to surge the troops into Afghanistan. And what we've heard recently is that there's this pact now that could essentially tie us down to defend the current government in Afghanistan for another 10 years after 2014. So there's just no end in sight here. This has hardly been the peace president, or a peace regime. In addition, we're looking at the privatization of education, which continues under this White House. And there is a crisis now for students that has basically turned them into indentured servants, that they have these draconian loans that essentially cannot be paid back under current employment conditions. Students are facing 30 to 50% unemployment and underemployment. So, they sort of don't have a future under either the Democratic or Republican parties. The rollback, or I should say the all-out assault on our civil liberties with the criminalization of protest with H.R. 347 and the National Defense Authorization Act that basically codified the violations of George Bush, the violations of our civil liberties, and then took them even further. So that includes indefinite detentions. So this president and all future presidents have the ability to just basically declare you an enemy of the state for whatever private reasons they may have. They're not required to justify it in any way. They can lock you up indefinitely, throw away the key if they like, never having accused you of a crime or brought you before a jury, and targeted assassinations, which Bush was doing to non-citizens, Obama is now doing to citizens as well. So, people who aren't quaking in their boots right now about the absolute assault on our civil liberties have real reason to think about this and wake up while we still can. In the area of racial justice, we're looking at the rollback of these rights with the massive expanding prison industrial complex and the racist war on drugs, which has been expanded under this White House with the assault on medical marijuana. So that legal businesses that are providing an important medication are being criminalized and being put out of business, and patients who have prescriptions and urgent, serious needs for what marijuana can treat, like PTSD or a whole variety of other conditions, including cerebral palsy and a variety of illnesses, they too are being criminalized now. So it's just tragic and really outrageous how that war on drugs, which itself is, has contributed to racial profiling and the demonization of African American men. Ironically, that is all expanding under this president. So we've just sort of run through the record on how in so many ways this president has embraced the policies of George Bush and actually expanded them and gotten away with things that George Bush never could have gotten away with. So the wonderful thing is that all this struggle has really woken people up, and people are standing up like the world hasn't seen in generations. And we are a movement which is alive and well at the grassroots all across America. Witness in the Occupies in Wisconsin, the movement to move your money, to take it out of the big corporate banks that screwed us on the economy and move it to local banks. There is a surge of democracy and justice going on now. It's alive and well. It deserves a voice in this election and a choice at the polls that's not already bought and paid for by Wall Street, which the other two parties are. Because in fact, to vote for either of them is to basically give a mandate for 4 more years of Wall Street rule, and that is the very definition of throwing away your vote. When people say, oh, I can't vote third party, I would be throwing away my vote. In fact, you're not only throwing away your vote to vote for more of what's literally killing us, it's worse than throwing away your vote. It's actually using your vote as a weapon against yourself to enable the 1% basically to continue its waste, fraud, and abuse basically at all levels of the economy and our democracy. So we're saying the alternative to that actually is voting green in the presidential race. In other races, it may be voting, for other independent third parties. But in the presidential race, we now have an alternative to more of the same. You can stand up and vote your vision and your values, and to do so is to basically make an unsuppressible call for the kind of real system change that we need. We're not going to get out of this just by changing the personality and getting a great orator and a likable person. You know, we really need a whole new system. And the last 10 years have really clarified that we need a system change here. So what we propose basically are solutions that the public already supports. And in fact, the campaign has been such a unbelievably uplifting, fun, exhilarating experience. It's like handing out candy because we don't need to tell people that there's a problem. 1 out of every 2 Americans now is either in poverty or close to it. 50 million Americans don't have health care. 6 million Americans have lost their homes. Another 6 million are on the pipeline for that. 30 million students are basically indentured servants and have no way to get out of it because they don't have jobs. So we don't have to be convincing people that we have a problem. We just have to reach people, because when we do, they're ready to say, wow, you know, I need more of that. I'm going to support that, and I'm going to get word out to my network on Facebook and on the internet and to my friends, because this is what we need. So we have the incredible advantage of actually offering the agenda that people are already on record as hungering for. So what is that? Our highest priority is what we call a Green New Deal. So this is an emergency program to put 25 million people to work, to end unemployment, to jumpstart the green economy for the future, and to put a halt to climate change. It puts communities in the driver's seat, so the communities are saying what kind of jobs they need to be sustainable, not just ecologically, but also socially and economically. So we're talking about clean manufacturing, convert the war machine factories to wind tower and solar and geothermal and efficiencies and the new electric grid. We need a lot of R&D and we need a lot of production. Why not produce things that make us stronger and healthier and more sustainable instead of things that are destroying us and the broader world at large, communities abroad? So we're talking clean manufacturing, local organic agriculture, which we need, makes us healthy as well, as opposed to this fake food system, this fake industrialized food system that we have right now, which is very much at the roots of these public health epidemics that our healthcare system at $2 trillion a year can hardly make a dent into. Public transportation. We need it. That can also be part of the conversion of our factories and so on to clean manufacturing. And the public transportation system should include bikes and safe sidewalks so that kids can walk and bike to school and adults can bike to work. In Copenhagen, where they have this structure, 40% of people are actually biking to work. And you can imagine what a difference that makes in the health of the society. And put that together with pollution prevention through green energy and the transition to clean, renewable energy and conservation. You know, you have basically the makings of a health infrastructure. You also have a system that makes wars for oil obsolete. We don't need them anymore when we've greened our economy. Imagine that. We don't have to be spending another $1 trillion a year on this military-industrial security complex. Bring the war dollars home, bring the troops home, bring the bases home, and retire the drones.
That's exactly what my son that's in Afghanistan says. It's for the oil.
Exactly.
And they sent him back. Helicopter pilot, and they had him on the front lines.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And I haven't heard from him in almost 4 months.
Oh, how terrifying.
And I'm just...
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Yeah, and this is another reason why we need to do the right thing, because doing the right thing by way of energy and foreign policy is the right thing for our young men and women. We need to be providing the support so that they have jobs here and so that they have access to free public higher education so they can get the kinds of jobs that they need and they don't have to join the military and go off to fight foreign wars.
Right.
Yes, oh, this is a tragedy and I'm very sorry to hear that. And I wish you all the support and strength. Yes, so doing the right thing by way of the economy with a Green New Deal is to do the right thing also by way of our foreign policy. And guess what? It also creates the infrastructure for health. Because right now we don't have a healthcare system, we have a sick care system, which is extremely expensive. It costs us, you know, again, this $2 trillion a year. But did you know this, that 75% of every healthcare dollar is spent on chronic diseases that we wouldn't have at all if we simply had an infrastructure for health in our communities, if we had healthy food, the right to recreate, a right to recreation and to have it integrated into our transportation system. You have recreation, you have food, and you have pollution prevention because we've got green energy, not dirty fossil fuels and nuclear power, then voila, most of our illness just goes away. It doesn't happen to start with. So this is, you know, this is another win for the Green New Deal. It's a win for jobs and our economy. It is a win for employment. It's a win for the planet, and it's a win for our health. In addition to providing jobs, it also provides for the conditions of working people. So that means health care as a human right through a Medicare for All system, which doesn't cost us money, it actually saves us money. It streamlines that massive, wasteful health insurance bureaucracy where 30% of every dollar is going to paper pushing and CEO salaries, as opposed to Medicare for All, where the overhead is 2%. From 30% down to 2%, that's a good deal. That extra administrative money allows the healthcare system to cover everyone and to cover you completely. So no taking out the reproductive system or your mouth and your teeth or your ears or your eyes and your need for glasses, your mental health and pharmaceuticals. It all gets covered because of the excess, and I would add to that chronic care as well is covered under a Medicare for All system much more effectively and cheaply. In addition, it puts you back in charge so that you're deciding who your healthcare provider is. It's not dictated to you by a health insurance CEO, and you and your provider make the decisions about what kind of care you want and what kind of care you need. And it saves money also because it stabilizes medical inflation, and it turns out that is the biggest driver of rising healthcare costs. It's this enormous inflation in the healthcare system, which is much bigger than inflation out in the broader economy. And that basically goes away under a Medicare for All system. So according to some economists like Dean Baker, who advocate, you know, really fundamental healthcare reform, not like Obamacare or Romney Care, but real health care reform, according to him, because it stabilizes medical inflation, will save us trillions of dollars over the course of the next decade. So this is not a money drain, it's actually a money saver and helps us pay for other parts of the Green New Deal. Likewise, we are calling for education as a human right, including free public higher education, so that it's tuition free. Everyone who wants to go can go and get a college degree. We need to do it because in the 20th century, a high school degree was understood. You needed it for economic security. In the 21st century, we need that from a college degree. A high school degree no longer cuts it. We need a college-educated generation. We know from the GI Bill that it actually pays for itself many times over. For every dollar that was invested in the GI Bill for the returning soldiers, $7 was returned to the taxpayers through economic improvement and through increased revenues. So this is a no-brainer. This too is an investment that pays for itself. We're also calling for bailing out the students. We bailed out the banks who trashed the economy. It's time to bail out the students who are victims of that waste, fraud, and abuse on Wall Street. So that is something, you know, it would cost far less than the Wall Street bailouts did. We owe it to our students. They need to be full, productive members of the economy, not just minimum wage employees who are struggling to repay their debt. And to add to that, the Green New Deal includes also financial reforms like breaking up the big banks that are too big to fail, stopping the Wall Street bailouts, taxing the rich, including a Wall Street transaction tax and taxing capital gains like income, because that's where the money really resides. And while, what does he call it, the Buffett proposal to have a certain minimum tax from millionaires, that's all well and good, and that should be done, but it shouldn't stop there. We need a set of increasing progressive taxes so that billionaires are paying more than millionaires, millionaires are paying at a higher percentage than half millionaires, than quarter millionaires, et cetera. You need a really progressive, truly progressive income tax, but equally important is that capital gains needs to be taxed as income, because that's where the real money lies once you get up into, into real levels of wealth. That's the basics on the financial reform. And then I'll just mention also that we include democracy reforms too, because there is public support for these changes, but there's this incredible disconnect between what people want and what the 1% is getting out of a government that's serving the 1%. So we need democracy reforms, especially to harness the public will for these changes, for these proposed reforms. Let's let the public back into the public airwaves so that candidates would have access without having to raise billions of dollars in the case of the presidential campaign and make the backroom deals in order to get that money. So this is something that actually the president could start doing on day one. It doesn't even need to pass Congress because the president controls the FCC appointments. So the president, in fact, can appoint people to the FCC who have committed to reopening the public airwaves as a public resource. So once you've leveled that playing field, access to media, then you can still have money pouring into politics, but it doesn't do any good because it can't buy the airwaves anymore. So it goes a long way to begin that cleanup of politics and to also ensure that the public is actually informed of what's really going on and what we can do. Otherwise, we're flying blind, both as voters in elections, but also as a democracy. We need to open up the public airwaves so that we actually have public interest and public service time to let the public really know what's going on. In addition, we're calling for a constitutional right to vote that can't be taken away by voter ID laws, for example, trying to keep students and elders and people of color away from the polls. We need to ensure that our votes are reliable and have integrity through the guaranteed use of hand-marked paper ballots instead of these electronically controlled voting machines, which are a terrible liability and are basically open to abuse and fraud. And finally, we need election reform so that our votes, we are voting within systems that actually give our votes meaning. Let's get rid of the Electoral College. Let's adopt proportional representation so that if the Green Party is 15% of the vote, we have 15% of Congress and the legislature. And finally, ranked choice voting, are people familiar with that? It basically means that you can walk into the voting booth and rank your choices. If you support an underdog, say it was Ralph Nader, you can vote for him as #1 and then have, maybe it's Al Gore who was your #2, listed as your #2. That way, if your first choice loses, your vote is automatically reassigned to your second choice. So there's no issue about, quote, throwing away your vote or not having a real impact with your vote. We can fix that with the stroke of a pen through ranked choice voting. So this is also part of our agenda to actually get the Green New Deal and the democracy and financial reforms that ensure it will be implemented. A couple other quick mentions. I mentioned single-payer health care and education. We would put an end to home foreclosures. We would basically call a moratorium on them and require the banks to actually negotiate with homeowners in order to keep them in their homes, and would require the banks to lower the principal down to current market value, which would enable people much more comfortably to be able to meet those mortgages, and require the banks to actually allow people to rent if they're not able to buy. And the reason for that is that the banks caused this crisis. They had a wave of predatory mortgages, and they also shirked their duty, which they are legally required to do and ethically required to do, to ensure that they are not giving mortgages to people who cannot handle them. So across the board, the banks really hold responsibility for this crisis and should contribute to solving it. Finally, we need to bring the troops home from these illegal and immoral wars, and to also bring them back from over 1,000 bases in over 140 countries around the world and put an end to the drone wars. This is hundreds of billions of dollars back into our budget every year, and we're calling for downsizing our bloated military budget as well, which was basically doubled after 9/11. And how much good actually has that done us? I mean, look at how we left Iraq. We left Iraq under cover of darkness with a secret withdrawal because they were afraid they would be ambushed as they left. So how much of a victory exactly is that? When you gotta cover your tracks in order to pull out. That wasn't a victory, And we've essentially armed warring factions in Afghanistan, so we've hardly created the peace there either. So, it's time to downsize the military and convert our foreign policy from one of military might and dictated in large degree by these wars for oil and the need for resources and to defend our access to those resources. With the Green New Deal, we don't need to do that anymore because we are taking care of our energy needs here at home. And instead, we can have a foreign policy based on international law and human rights. Finally, it's time to legalize marijuana because it is a substance that is dangerous because it's illegal. It's not illegal because it's dangerous, if you catch my drift. It's far safer than other substances that are not regulated at all. That is, they are not on the list of scheduled substances, including alcohol and tobacco, notably. That, in fact, marijuana has many positive therapeutic values, and as a recreational drug, or I should say as a recreational substance, is certainly far safer than alcohol and nicotine. There is no scientific reason for it to be on the list of scheduled drugs, and especially to be on Schedule 1, which is like so dangerous that you can't even study it. It's such a, it makes a mockery of the whole drug enforcement system. So the president can actually do this on day one as well, to instruct the Food and Drug Administration to use science as opposed to hypocrisy or politics or whatever, influence peddling, to appropriately list substances or take them off. And in fact, science argues that there is no reason for either marijuana or hemp, particularly, to be listed substances. And hemp is a very critical economic resource for farming, for agriculture, turns out for nutrition as well. Hemp is a great source of omega-3s and other anti-inflammatory fatty acids. And as our fish supply is increasingly polluted and overfished, it's really important for us to have other sources of omega-3s. Hemp is a very important potential source. It's also potentially a powerful biofuel, and it's a very important substance for manufacturing. Henry Ford actually made automobiles out of hemp. So it's a resource that is being denied to all sorts of community-based industries that could be using it right now. So that can happen on day one of my administration if I have the honor of serving. So that basically takes us to the agenda. So to wrap up before we open up for questions, a really troubling question is, people support this agenda by large majorities. Why don't we have it? So one of the big reasons is that this drumbeat of fear has really been pounded into us, especially over the last 10 years. And we've been told that, oh no, you cannot vote your values, terrible things will happen, you have to vote your fears, you've got to do the lesser evil thing. But it's important to actually put the facts on the table. People might have believed that 10 years ago, not knowing what the consequences would be. But let's look at what the consequences have been. How is that lesser evil thing actually working out for you, for your jobs, for peace, for the climate, you name it? It's very clear, looking over the track record, that silence has not been an effective political strategy. In fact, the politics of fear has delivered everything that we were afraid of. The expanding war, the Wall Street bailouts, the offshoring of our jobs, the meltdown of the climate, the collapse, the impending collapse of our healthcare system and our education system, which is being privatized, right under our noses. So it's time to stand up to the politics of fear and meet it instead with the politics of courage. In fact, looking back over the history of how we made progress, the abolition of slavery, it had the Liberty Party. The women's right to vote had the Women's Party. The 40-hour work week, safe working conditions, the right to unionize, to have child labor laws, retirement, Social Security, you name it, it all came up through independent third parties, independent politics like the socialist, labor, and progressive parties. These things have never come from the entrenched corporate big parties. Progress always depended on it coming from independent politics. When the fear campaign really kicked in about 10 or 12 years ago, independent politics kind of went underground and disappeared, in fact. Although the Green Party didn't go away because it got what was going on. But for the most part, a lot of people withdrew and were just scattered to the wind. So what happened when we kept quiet? What happened when we didn't make waves and just held our noses and voted for the lesser evil? We got all those things that we were afraid of, because basically, as Frederick Douglass put it so well, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, it never will. That's what the Green Party is all about. That's what our campaign is all about, is driving those demands into the broader political dialogue where they can actually take on a life of their own because people support them if daylight can shine on them. That is our role as an independent political party. It's not throwing away your vote. In fact, it's throwing away your vote to vote for more of what's killing you. But it's actually using your vote, as a very powerful arm of democracy to vote for what we need and what we will not get, what will not even be mentioned if we are not there voting for it. So we say you don't have to just vote with your feet, you can actually vote with your vote and drive these solutions forward and help build the base, the movement, in this movement for economic and political democracy that is alive and well and deserves a voice in this election. So it's a no-lose proposition, whether we are 2% of the vote or whether we are 32% or even 52% of the vote. It is a win simply to have reclaimed our political voice and to be moving these life-saving, economy-saving, planet-saving solutions forward into the political agenda where they cannot be stopped, because this is what we need, what the public deserves, and what the public wants. So I invite you to be the campaign, not just give your vote to the campaign, but to actually be the campaign, to go to our website, join the team, sign up as a volunteer, and the website is jillstein.org. That's Jill, S-T-E-I-N, as one word, .org. And if you sign up for a volunteer, you'll get the newsletter, and that's a great way to spread the word, to just forward it to your address book, your email contacts, your Facebook. Like us on Facebook. That's how we go viral. And never doubt the power of a small circle of friends to change the world. That's not only what Margaret Mead said, it's what happened in Tunisia not so very long ago. It's what happened in Egypt. Who in their right mind would have thought that a bunch of young people who were really up against the wall could get out there and totally change the course of history? That is, that's what independent parties and social movements have been doing for the last several centuries, actually, is changing history together. Don't doubt our ability to do that right now. So by going to the website, signing up, helping us go viral, making a contribution to our matching funds drive. We are eligible to get matched by federal matching funds, dollar for dollar. We're very close to making that matching fund threshold right now. If you go to the website and you make a contribution, it will soon be matched, and it will help get us to that threshold. To meet the match, we have to raise $5,000 in each of 20 states. We've actually met that threshold in California, and we're in the process of getting there in the other states. We are there in many, and we are close in many more. And your contribution in California basically will be doubled once we reach that threshold. We have a ballot access drive, which is going on right now, to ensure that 95% of voters actually have the opportunity to vote on their own behalf, not for more Wall Street bailouts. They can vote for themselves in this election by getting our name and the Green Party on the ballot. We have not missed a single ballot access deadline or threshold yet. You may know that the establishment works very hard to keep challengers out, like they do in Egypt. You know, they just make it illegal. Or they used to. That's changing now. They used to just make it illegal. In this country, they didn't quite make it illegal, but they just made it impossible for non-corporate political parties to be heard, for real political alternatives and opposition parties. So it is a very big deal to get on the ballot in each state. There are different rules in each state, but we have ballot drives going on in 48 of the states right now, in everywhere except where it's completely impossible without millions of dollars to buy your way into the ballot. So we hope to be there. Your contribution will help us do that. If you like to collect signatures, if you're a petitioner, we can send you to some nearby states to help in the petition drives nearby. And above all, you know, just helping to network the campaign, to get on Facebook and like, share, and repost on a daily basis if you can, is how we go viral, how we basically do a Tunisia or we do a Tahrir Square right here. And as I say, the bottom line is whether we win the office or simply win the day by reclaiming our political voice. Either way, it's a win, and don't let them tell you otherwise. They're doing all they can. They're quaking in their boots that the power of Occupy, the power of the Wisconsin uprising, the power of the revolutions in the Middle East, it's going on here. People have hit the wall. 1 out of every 2 Americans in or close to poverty. Real wages are declining with, you know, with just all that's going on in the erosion of the power of wages where they are. The minimum wage is basically collapsing. On every front, people are up against the wall. So in this election, we can turn this breaking point into a tipping point and take back the promise of our democracy and the peaceful, just, green future that really is within our reach. So thank you for being here. Yeah.
I have a basic question.
Great.
That is, I'm an advocate of all the things of which you speak. One of the things that I find most difficult, even in our own community here, is talking to people about the way things always happen. You know, we hear all the time, we have no budget, we're being asked to do more and more and more and more, and everything stays the same. We have the same forum, we have the same format, same way of making those decisions. How do you see, in the position that you would have, being able to open up the dialogue, which is what I keep asking about, so that those of us who have extensive networks, understand the resources that are available at the level of community, have an opportunity to participate in decision making and solving the problems.
Exactly.
I mean, you're going to be working with the Republican Democratic Congress. How's that going to work?
Great. Yeah. And thank you for asking, because there's a wonderful response to that. And what we would do and how I would operate as president is to acknowledge that the president is not just commander-in-chief, the president should be organizer-in-chief. Because we do not essentially have a free press, and kudos to the press who are here today, who really are the free press of today. You know, the mainstream press is not a press, they are an oppress, and they are a repress and a depress. And their job is to keep us uninformed and disempowered. You know, that's what they're paid to do, essentially, create the illusion of informing us. And as Thomas Jefferson, you know, made very clear, you cannot have a democracy without an informed and an empowered electorate. So what the president can do, very specifically, you know, it's sort of like a moveon.org that moves on from the Democratic Party, because the moveon.org has a great technique and strategy, but it's relatively limited in what it tries to do. But simply by letting people know what bill is coming up, when it's coming up, we can sort of blow the whistle on Congress. Imagine if we had a president who was a whistleblower on the incredible abuses that come out of Congress, where in fact the Congress itself often doesn't know, most of the time has not had time to read the bills. You know, the bills are thousands of pages long. They're written by lobbyists, and they're written in language that cannot be understood by ordinary mortals. You know, you have to be a corporate lawyer to understand what the bills are about. So imagine you had a White House that was actually informing the public. The Medicare for All bill will be voted on next week. Here are the 3 points you need to make to your congressmen and women and your senators. This is the time to call them and to let them know that you know what's in that bill. You know that we need that bill. And if they want your vote in November, they need to vote to meet your needs right now in that bill. This is what happened just recently around the SOPA bill, you know, the Stop Online Piracy Act. Word got out. No help from Congress, no help from the president, no help from the corporate media. This was all about Facebook and people going viral with the outrage of what was about to happen. It was the exception to the rule. And it stopped the bill in its tracks. But this needs to be the rule rather than the exception. People need to know, because people generally want exactly what we're talking about. So if we get the word out, the bill's coming up, now is the time to weigh in, let's pass that bill. I think, you know, the terms of engagement are going to be turned on their head. So it will be very hard for Congress not to serve an alerted and mobilized public, as opposed to now where we don't have a democracy at all. It's just not happening. And that is step one, for the president to be the organizer in chief. But using that as a strategy, we can actually pass the system reforms that then begin to open up the system, so that we have open meeting laws and public record laws, not only at the state level, but also nationally, so that people can see for themselves what's going on, and that routinely bills are written to be read by everyday people, not by corporate lobbyists. We need to get the money out of politics, and that would be a high priority to do quickly. The president can help pass the constitutional amendment to take the rights of personhood back from corporations so that they're not able to mess with our elections and to buy them out and hijack them. They're not able to use money as speech. I mean, that's a preposterous claim, and the Supreme Court, you know, unfortunately has not been on the right side of history for quite some, in fact, for most of its existence, you know. And that's a whole other issue that needs sorting out. But to start with, the president can go a long way to help pass that constitutional amendment, to help pass public financing for political campaigns, to open up the airwaves, to democratize our system, including the reforms I ran through with the Green New Deal, to ensure that everyone has the right to vote with a hand-marked paper ballot, so no engineering of election results, as well as, you know, to reform our political system so you can rank your votes, you can rank your choices. So there are so many ways that we can fix this, and we can do it now. There are other reforms like participatory budgeting and things, which are a great idea and also need to be promoted. I didn't mention, I think, that we're talking for the Green New Deal about not only small businesses, but also worker cooperatives, so that we have a more cooperative economy, so that working people have more ownership and more say in the kind of economy, the kind of investments that we're making. There are just a whole lot of changes that can be driven from the White House in support of where the public is. So it's not Congress taking marching orders from lobbyists, which is how currently government is run. And the president takes marching orders from the lobbyists. And he, in fact, appoints the lobbyists to the White House and his own cabinet, everything from Monsanto to Goldman Sachs, and Wall Street. The predators are firmly in control in this White House. And that's another thing the president can do, is house clean on day one and get Wall Street and the predators out of the business of running the economy. I mean, imagine Jeffrey Immelt, the CEO of GE, who personally laid off more American workers than any other human being, who closed more factories than any other CEO. This is the guy that President Obama appointed to head his Jobs Commission. What does that say about the prevailing, who's running the show in the White House? So this too can be changed on day one.
You're describing a lot of the problems and a lot of your proposed reforms, but the question, rewinding a bit, is why you're running on the Green Party ticket.
Great.
You're saying people are against the wall. Well, since 2000, I think the Green Party is against the wall. In California, we've seen a massive decline in voter registration with the Green Party. In Humboldt County, we've gone from 5 elected Green City Council members to 0 and a 40% decline in party registration. Why should the voters have the faith in the Green Party you're suggesting they do instead of a Rocky Anderson or another progressive third-party candidate?
Great. Wonderful question, and thanks for asking that. The reality is that all other parties, all other third non-corporate parties have been wiped off the face of the planet. The cup is 10% empty or 90% full, depending on how you look at it. And yes, the Green Party has been knocked back by this era of incredible repression, political repression, and demonizing fear campaigns and smear campaigns. They've impacted all parties, and most of them have folded as national electoral institutions. They don't exist anymore. The Green Party has managed to survive in that era of repression, so that we have actually hundreds of elected officials around the country. We are still, alive and well as political parties, as state parties around the country. We are the only non-corporate political party that actually can get access to the ballot. Peace and Freedom might have 3 or 5 states. Socialist Alternative doesn't have any. Labor Party has disappeared, founded at the same time as the Greens, with much more institutional support, way more money, and they're gone. The New Party, also gone. Most, in fact, all other progressive parties have been wiped out. So yes, the Green Party has taken a hit in this era of fear-mongering. But what a tribute to the party it is that it alone has managed to survive such that we're actually on the ballot. I'm not sure how many states other independent candidates are on. And I would say that we are actually a party. We are running candidates at the local level, not just one person for president. Otherwise, you basically have an independent who's running their own campaign. And if you know anything about independent politics, the only way you can run effectively as one solo person is if you get a whole lot of money from the usual suspects, the predators out there. That's how you run solo campaigns. Otherwise, you can't do it. And in spite of the best of intentions, I think this is going to be a learning experience for Rocky, who's just emerged from the Democratic Party and who's learning a lot about how hard it is to actually build and create a political party and have it there for the long haul and actually have volunteers who can get you on the ballot. This is why that temptation is always there to sell out to the big money. But we know what happens when you do that. So if you really want to have a position of integrity and be accountable to the people, you really need volunteers and you need a structure to do that. So that doesn't happen overnight. That actually takes years to build the trust and the relationships and the commitment. That is what the Green Party brings to the table. I myself had my wake up about national politics. I've been an active Green, but always at the local and state level, and that's sort of you know, that for me has been what grassroots politics is all about. But I had my wake-up call about national politics last year with the debt ceiling crisis, that concocted crisis for which the president was then saying, oh, well, we can fix that by putting Medicare and Social Security on the chopping block. And many of us hit the wall at that point. For me, that was when I realized, oh my God, you know, thank goodness we have a national party that can actually fight this and not allow that to go unchallenged. So that was a point where I got involved to make sure that point of view would not go unchallenged, not intending or wanting to be a national candidate myself, but I got recruited in the process by the people that I thought could do the job. I wound up being sort of arm-twisted towards it, but I have to say, having thought that this would be a really bitter and vicious campaign, it's been like exactly the opposite. And I'm finding people are so grateful. It's like giving out candy to tell people that you can actually vote for something different. You don't have to go into the voting booth and vote for more of the same. And you know, I think it's great for people to run for office, but you know, as a reality check, you can't do that as solo actors. It takes years to build a party, and I think it creates a lot of appreciation for the parties that are here to have gone through what it means to try to run an opposition campaign. It's a very difficult thing to do, a very difficult thing to keep a basically volunteer party together, and I think it's a real tribute to the Greens that we have the big vision and the sense of commitment, because those other parties got wiped out. Why did the Green Party survive when we didn't have the money or the institutional support that they had? We didn't have those advantages. The advantage we had was the vision, the big vision, and getting, you know, once you see it, you can't forget about it, you know, that we need an ecological politics that understands how the environment and the economy and social justice all work together. And I think that's why the Greens have survived, is because we just can't get that out of our heads. We've been ahead of the curve, and the curve just caught up to us. It's called climate change. And we got like a handful of years to do something about it. This is another reason why it's the Greens, not only because they are the one vehicle for moving forward, but also because they are the one party that actually knows how to fix this. And in fact, in many countries around the world where the Greens have on-the-ground experience at high levels of government, you know, as members of national cabinets, in charge of environmental policy and foreign policy and so on, we got a lot of experience. Germany is doing great right now economically, and it's as a conversion to the green economy. They're doing really well, also in terms of workers' rights and pay level and so on. So Greens have enormous experience as real actors here that we can share and bring to the table at this time when we desperately and incredibly need it. And that's why I am so grateful to the Green Party for doing that hard work, which I myself can't take one iota of credit for, because I've just been working at the local level. But for those who've been working at the national level, it's fabulous. And I commend them. And I also want to recognize that when you're a small party, you got to go through some very difficult growing pains. And I think the Green Party has been through that and is coming out the other end now much wiser and much stronger. As we grow, and we're growing very much in this campaign because people are just coming in by droves right now. As we grow, we have more people. Once you get to a certain level, you can start having contested elections internally. And when you begin to do that, you go from being sort of small party mentality to being much more pragmatic, much more functional, and much more capable as a political party. And I think that's very much where we're going right now. And you know, I think hold on to your hats, and this is a really exciting race.
Well, that was my follow-up question, is that in 2004, you had a very hotly contested contest inside the Green Party, and a lot of Green Party leaders, such as Carol Miller from New Mexico and Forrest Hill from here in California and so forth, felt cheated at the Green Party National Convention, where parties that existed on paper had almost the same voting strength as California with 100,000 members, and they handed the nomination to David Cobb, even though he lost in almost every primary he was in terms of the actual voters, to Ralph Nader. In terms of rebuilding trust in the Green Party, what do you think has been done to reform the national structure to make it one man and one woman, one vote, and to get the party back on track to where internal democracy is a reality?
Yes, exactly. And I think internal democracy has so much to do with reaching critical mass in the party. And until you have contested internal elections, it's very hard to have people who are really cut out for the job, because anyone can walk into the job of being the party secretary, the local party administrator, co-chair, et cetera, when you don't have contested elections. And likewise into your national committee and so on, anyone can walk into the job. That's why there's an inevitable period of growing pains as parties go from very small to critical mass. So I think in part that's going on, but also I think it's just the experience of the last decade. And what I'll say is that within our campaign, we have the Cobbites and Naderites. In fact, I was recruited by Naderites to run. And I myself have been in neither camp because I wasn't capable of even seeing the value of a national race. So there are a lot of Greens that were in that boat too. I think in many ways it is the incredible emergency that we're facing right now that helps people all get together around the same table and say, you know, we're all on the same page here, basically. Let's get something working. And that's what we're finding happening in the course of this campaign. And the reason that I became really excited about doing this race was because we had people joining in from every possible camp and from every corner of the country to make this a really powerful and empowering race. And suddenly we're all on the same page. It's very exciting. 4 years ago, there was a big debate about whether we were going to have safe states or whether we were going to run all out. And that was a big difference between the Cobb and the Nader camps. That's no longer a debate. I think people really recognize that no state is a safe state right now, that we're all incredibly imperiled by the emergencies to our, you know, the basic breakdown of our economy, our environment, our planet, our future, et cetera. So everybody now, you know, like the public is fighting angry. That's going on within the Green Party too, and it's enabled us to really collaborate and have a pretty, you know, campaigns are generally, you know, not loving community building places, but I have to say this campaign comes pretty close to that, and people are pretty much working very collaboratively and really enjoying it, and are really helping to build the party as we go. And we get this is not just about what happens on Election Day in November. This is about building an alternative voice for the long haul to be that opposition party that we need and are going to need very much going forward, because there's no sign out there on the horizon that the political establishment has any concept of what needs to be done or any capability of doing it. They are completely under lockdown. Thank you.